This weekend, Silverstone plays host to the final rounds within the MSA British Rallycross Championship, including the showdown in the Swift Sport Rallycross Championship. Morgan Bailey has already taken the crown. He's here, the car is here, but it's up for sale, and so he's not racing, keeping out of the battle to be the runner-up in the championship. Simon Ovenden, former champion, topping the points after qualifying. The first semi-final then is good to get underway. The car's on the grid, and as we get set for racing, it's Simon Ovenden that will start on pole position going into this race. Lining up with him at the front, Chris Scott, Nikita Abramov on the front row ahead of Joe Booth, Don McLeod, and newcomer Richard Lill at the back of the grid. We go racing, top four will qualify, don't forget, as everybody now blasts away. The run up towards turn one, and it's going to be Simon Ovenden that goes through in the lead, gets a little bit crossed up, does he? Fights the car, fighting for traction. We've had a bit of lunchtime rain here at Silverstone, so what was already a relatively slippery track is even more so now, and Chris Scott heads his way onto the loose for the first time, but it's Simon Ovenden then who is up front and trying now to build this advantage as the cars make their way up towards the jump for the first time. Simon was the champion last year with 4 wins. He hasn't done every event this season. Had he done so, he could well have become champion 2 years in a row, because the pace has been there whenever we've seen him. Chris Scott runs second, and then the impressive newcomer, Nikita Abramov, former rallyer, is there in third place as they come up towards the end of the first lap now. Threading their way in just about every case through the normal lap, although one getting sideways is Joe Booth, and behind another one going for the joker lap looks like being Don McLeod. Leaders come through then, 1 lap in the book, and there Nikita Abramov, who if he stays on for another season next year could well be a force to be reckoned with. He's got quicker and quicker. So too Chris Scott, back into the sport, brother of Super 1600 racer Darren. We saw him in 2010 in Swift, for example. It's been a long layoff, but he's come back and come back well. Heads over the jump now, down towards turn 5. Now in these relatively underpowered cars, 1600cc engines, it's less of a problem landing and then getting the car slowed down and turned in compared to, say, a supercar into that turn 5 right-hander. The Swift Sport, a great way of coming into rallycross. There are plentiful cars, plenty of parts around. They're a good, low-cost entry route into the sport. And it's also very competitive, very close racing, as Don McLeod then threads his way up towards the end of the lap, going through turns 8 and 9. There, on the tarmac into turn 1, is Nikita Abramov once again. Now the race leader, still Simon Ovenden, building that gap, but Abramov, despite the slide there at turn 2, is closing on Chris Scott. It's game on now for second and third places. Over the jump comes the race leader, Simon Ovenden, not getting as much air underneath the car as Chris Scott does behind him. The Ovenden family already celebrating the Super National Championship, because Tristan Ovenden, Simon's brother, has taken that. Chris Scott running second, and then Abramov third as they drop down towards turn 7. There's Don McLeod having served the joker lap, but just worrying about the pace of that car. Didn't look that quick as it came over the jump. Top 4 go through. Can Don McLeod get himself into that magic 4? Race leader still with a big cushion in hand. That is Simon Ovenden going through. There behind him, pushing on, Chris Scott. And the next one out of turn 1 should be Nikita Abramov. This Silverstone rallycross track, new this year, played host, of course, to the opening BRX rounds. It's had the World Championship in May, and now the season concludes here. Just the 1 round next year. The season will kick off at Silverstone. The race leader, Simon Ovenden, comes now down towards turn 7, looking as though the win is there for the taking, because Chris Scott, try as he might, just cannot get close enough. He turns through turn 7. Ovenden, I suspect, is going to joker right at the very end. Push on, try and build the gap. Silverstone rare in rallycross circuits by having the joker lap at the end rather than at the start, so it means that you've got a whole lap of racing before you have to make your decision. Ovenden goes through, he's out of turn 1. Chris Scott still there in second place, and Nikita Abramov, having jokered, is now a bit further back in third place. Onto the loose they come once again. Chris Scott pushing on. Earlier on in the day, he had a few dramas, it's fair to say, going through the joker lap section. A bit too much speed carried in, slithered out wide onto the grass, missed a corner. So he will be mindful when he gets to the joker section of being ultra careful. Coming down towards turn 7 now on this loose section of circuit. In fact, the film across the top of it gets swept away as the day wears on, so it just becomes rather rough rather than actual loose surface. Here is Don McLeod, slows the car nice and early for turn 5. Ovenden powering his way onto the last lap. Now Chris Scott will joker, and a big slide for Ovenden. He's going to catch that, is he? Yes, he is. Powers out of the corner on the back of Richard Lill. Now Richard, newcomer this weekend, started his first heat at the very back of the grid in order to keep out of people's way. He's going to drop a lap down here, but the motorsport project manager and engineer falls back behind Simon Ovenden. He's gaining experience all the time. Whether or not he's going to get into the final, I rather doubt now, but let's see whether he comes back for another season next year. If he does, no doubt he'll be quicker, more experienced. There in the background is Chris Scott, set for second place, but Richard Lill, newcomer to the sport, comes out of turn 7 as towards the joker lap now goes Simon Ovenden. He will wriggle his way through, but will he come out ahead? He should do. He's had the advantage race long, gets the car back onto the normal lap. That's Richard Lill going through to unlap himself effectively, and so now over the line to win semi-final 1 is Simon Ovenden, a dominant race winner. Chris Scott coming home second, Nikita Abramov in third. The last qualifier, Don McLeod ahead of Joe Booth, but Abramov third, Scott second, and Simon Ovenden, the winner of semi-final 1, book their places in the final. Semi-final 2 is good to go here at Silverstone. Max Weatherly is the man that will start on pole position. Dominic Flitney and Tom Llewellyn with him at the front of the grid. Christian Hainsworth and Ian Flitney, Dom's dad, on the second row. 5 start, 4 will go through. The lights go to green, and Tom Llewellyn, looking still for this maiden victory in a final this year, sprints away from the outside. But what he's going to try and do is cut across the front of the rest of them, going down towards turn 1. Can't do it, and it's Max Weatherly on the inside line then that leads the pack as they now make the run up towards the turn 2-3 sequence and then onto the loose. Weatherly getting involved with Dom Flitney, who's up on the inside line, and the Flitspeed car goes through. Thought it was going to get all sideways for a moment. It did just about get crossed up, but Flitney controls it and he leads with Llewellyn on the outside line of Weatherly now. Out of turn 5 they come, 3 for the lead. And the last thing they need is to trip over each other and risk not finishing. So Dominic Flitney has the advantage, Max Weatherly is second, and Tom Llewellyn, the dominant man last year in juniors and a winner first time out in these senior Swifts, he goes for the joker as a really sideways Dom Flitney comes up to the end of lap number 1. Ian Flitney in the second Flitspeed car also goes for the joker as over the line comes the race leader. Dominic Flitney it is then that leads the pack, comes over the line. The race prep man has the advantage. Max Weatherly doing the chasing in second place now. Christian Hainsworth third, the man from Guernsey. And as they come across that loose section up towards the jump, Dominic Flitney accelerates over it. The nose hits the deck, but he has got a lot of pressure on here because Max Weatherly is not that far adrift. Look, as they come out of turn 5. Both of them trying to book their places in the final as they come into the hairpin now. Flitney on the power, drags the car out of the corner, and remember, in these relatively underpowered cars, momentum is absolutely key. So through the normal lap comes the leader, up to the joker lap goes Max Weatherly. There is Ian Flitney, having lost ground by jokering early on. And over the timing line comes Max Weatherly, pushing on now, trying to get himself back ahead of Tom Llewellyn, which he does as they hit turn 1. So Llewellyn still third, and that means he's got a fair amount of work to do to get past Max Weatherly, a winner earlier on in the season, don't forget Max, somebody that's got better and better as the season has gone on. Simon Ovenden with 3 wins to his name, 1 to Max Weatherly, 4 to Morgan Bailey, the champion. And Tom Llewellyn is well aware of all of those figures and desperately wants to put his name on that winners list. Can he do it in the final at the end of the day? Down towards turn 7 they come now. Weatherly through that right-hander onto the power, and now goes left, wriggling his way through turns 8 and 9, back to the tarmac, the little kink at turn 10 just before the timing line. Now there, look, is Dominic Flitney, and he's going to lose out in a straight line. He's just jokered, and Weatherly comes up on the outside. This for the race lead. Flitney goes through, back ahead, but he brakes late. The car almost pushing out wide there, but he hangs on to it. Tucked up behind him is Max Weatherly, and a sideways Flitney is in danger of scrubbing off momentum there as he tries to gather it all back under control. Down towards the right-hander at turn 5 they come. The 3 leaders now in a line, and Flitney not being able to escape. He had before the Jokers just extended the advantage a little bit, but right now you can see there that Weatherly is on his tail and he goes through. Flitney goes wide, Weatherly dives up the inside and takes away the race lead, and now Flitney is all sideways. That puts him out wide, and that's going to give Llewellyn a chance possibly to get up alongside him. Through they come together. Llewellyn goes second, and so the early leader, Dominic Flitney, is falling away, and he's all sideways again. Great car control, gets himself out of strife, but loses a length in so doing. Max Weatherly it is then, across that loose surface. He's the man in charge now. Comes over the jump, Llewellyn behind him, the son of former British Rally champion David Llewellyn, and Tom turns right, trying to bring down that gap once again as they go onto that loose section. The bumpier section, the more slippery section. You see all the loose there, swept to the outside line, but if you run wide, miss your braking point for example, and get into that rather boggy earth, you really do lose pace. There is Ian Flitney, Dom's dad, and it looks as though he is going to be the one driver who misses out on a place here in the final. The leaders go through onto the last lap now. Max Weatherly is ahead, but only by what, 2-3 lengths going through turn 1. Llewellyn may now have to think about settling for that second place and make sure that he gets himself into the final without dramas. He's got the pace coming out of turn 3 though, look, because he inches back up onto the tail of Weatherly. Over the jump now. The cars nose their way over the jump into turn 5. The Swift Sport Championship has given great racing all season. We're not done yet because look, Llewellyn is closing at the end of semi-final 2. Dominic Flitney in third, dropping away, not really a factor. And Christian Hainsworth here trying to stay in that top 4 to make sure he qualifies. The aircraft engineer going through as the leaders come up towards the checkered flag. Max Weatherly will win semi-final 2. Tom Llewellyn is not that far behind him at flagfall, and third goes the way of the early leader Dominic Flitney. Weatherly half a second clear of Llewellyn. Flitney third, Hainsworth fourth. They go into the final. Ian Flitney shuts up shop. The final round of the Swift Sport Rallycross Championship, already won this year by Morgan Bailey, who is going to be the last race winner of the season. Row 1, Simon Ovenden, Max Weatherly, and alongside Chris Scott, Tom Llewellyn, and then Dominic Flitney on row 2, Nikita Abramov, Christian Hainsworth, Don McLeod at the back. Wait for those lights to go green, and we go racing. Good start by Scott, lights up the tyres. Bad start in contrast from Max Weatherly, who's going to get stuck in the traffic, and Scott leads into the first corner. Dominic Flitney round the outside, all sideways. Loses ground coming out of the corner, and Scott is ahead up to turn 2, and he keeps the advantage. Max Weatherly and Tom Llewellyn leaning on each other. Llewellyn tries to go round the outside here. Up they come towards the jump for the first time then. That little kink at turn 4. And hard on the brakes. Into turn 5 with Scott, Ovenden, Weatherly, Llewellyn, the leading quartet. Weatherly on the outside line there. So Chris Scott trying to build the advantage now. Who is going to joker early to try to get out of the traffic and then be able to concentrate on the rest of this 6-lap race. Chris Scott has the advantage at the end of lap number 1. And the first couple head for the joker. Make it 3, in fact, because Christian Hainsworth has gone for that joker lap. It looks as though also Dominic Flitney has done so. And the other, as they come through, was Tom Llewellyn. Max Weatherly there in the other black car running in third. So Scott is ahead of Ovenden. Chris Scott yet to win this year. Could this be the day? Out of turn 3, Scott leading Ovenden, but he's not getting away. But what he wants now maybe is for Weatherly to come up and challenge Simon Ovenden, and that would just delay the man in the red car. By having to defend, Simon Ovenden would lose pace against the leader. That could be the lifeline here that Chris Scott needs. Down they come, heading into the braking zone for turn 7. These 3 yet to joker, but Scott goes wide. Ovenden tries to force up the inside, can't quite do it. Scott stays ahead. Weatherly now goes for the joker lap. Through they wriggle. Across that loose surface, there is Nikita Abramov. Back onto tarmac. Out of turn 10, that little kink, and over the timing line once again. Silverstone has given great action this year. It's a very short lap, it's a tight and twisty lap. It keeps everybody pretty much tight together, and that joker always a factor no matter what the circuit is. Max Weatherly goes through. Simon Ovenden on the back here of Chris Scott. This, of course, for the race lead. They come over the jump again together. Heading into the right-hander of turn 5. No championship on the line here, but there's a lot of pride at stake. Max Weatherly pushing hard as well as he goes over the jump. Don McLeod is behind him. And the race leaders turning their way once again down towards the Joker lap section. Now heading here up towards the completion of the lap is Chris Scott. He goes through, makes his way over the timing line. And behind you can see what's going on as Simon Avernon, having gone for the Joker, comes out behind the black cars of Weatherly and Llewellyn, and also Flitney's going to get ahead of him as well. Through he goes around the outside line. Dominic Flitney goes ahead, manages to fend off Simon Avernon. So Simon, who was challenging for the race lead early on, has really lost out now. Comes over the jump, but losing pace, losing time. Simon Avernon falling away as the race leaders come down towards turn 7 again. So Simon, 3 wins this year, does not look like he's going to add to the tally. Max Weatherly has been a winner. Don Flitney hasn't had a victory, nor yet has Tom Llewellyn. That could well change here. Nikita Abramov goes for the Joker. Chris Scott could be the other first-time victor. Over the line they go. The laps tick down here at Silverstone. There is Dominic Flitney. He's been very spectacular all day long. And now that spectacular driving is proving to be a successful way of doing it, because he's keeping Simon Avernon behind him as they come out of turn 3 here, the left-hander. Over the jump is Chris Scott. Now, is he going to Joker right at the very end? And if he is planning to do that, has he built up enough of an advantage to be able to hang on to that race lead? Brake hard into turn 7 goes Flitney. And Simon Avernon now is going to have to dig deep to get himself up the order. Scott goes for the Joker, but I think he's going to lose places out of all of this. He's back on the road, look, onto the normal lap, but yes, he falls down the pecking order onto the last lap of the race. Flitney has gone through, Llewellyn has gone through, and Avernon goes through as well. So Chris Scott, jokering not quite at the very end, but at the end of the penultimate lap, falls back into 4th place in the queue. Chris Scott now trying to gain ground back again, but Tom Llewellyn looks as though he is on now for a first victory. It's been a long time coming. Everybody expected, given the way he'd gone in the juniors, to come in and really be the man to beat this season. It's just not gone his way. But in the final round of the championship, it looks like the Welsh Wizard is going to come out on top. Here is Dominic Flitney, another very pacey driver, and he will be second, and Simon Avernon is set for third as they wriggle their way up towards the checkered flag. Tom Llewellyn wins the last round of the championship, as he did last season on debut, but this year he's had to fight all season long in the Swift to score a win. He's done it. A big sigh of relief for Tom Llewellyn. Tom Llewellyn the winner at Silverstone, Dominic Flitney second, Simon Avernon third. 4th goes to Chris Scott ahead of Nikita Abramov, and Max Weatherly dropping back into 6th place. Morgan Bailey confirmed as the champion. His runner-up is Tom Llewellyn, just a point adrift, with Simon Avernon third and Max Weatherly 4th. 5th to Christian Hainsworth, Chris Scott in 6th.